Well, hi everyone. I wanted to touch on a subject that I've been thinking about for these last couple of days, which is prayer and what prayer represents not only religiously but symbolically and psychologically. And it's you know, and you could certainly argue that whether there should even be a separation of the two, as this profound psychological journey is also in and of itself um, tied religiously, and perhaps that um, religious literature and religious thought is an extension of psychology. But nevertheless, I find prayer to be very fascinating, and I'd never thought about it in these kinds of terms before, and so I thought I would share. And primarily thinking about what prayer is, um, because I think that in a deepest sense, it's an acknowledgement of human limitation, right? And it's something that signals that you've reached the end of your capabilities, and I need something beyond myself. And you find this um, if you go to things like AA and NA. There's this what's actually one of the steps is an acknowledgement that you cannot solve the mess that you're in merely by yourself. And it's that you have to reach to a power greater than yourself to be able to get you out of this situation that you're in. And so there's the meshing of two, right? And in a sense, that is what prayer is. It's like it's human, it's the meshing of human with the divine, if you will. And so, you do see this kind of idea that prayer signals that you've reached the end of your capabilities. Now, I'm not suggesting that should be the only time when prayer is to be had. In fact, I will argue against that type of reasoning, and propose that prayer should be something that is continuous and daily for these other reasons. But I find it that it is that in moments of desperation, even individuals who do not believe in God find themselves reaching out into what almost seems like a void, or into the world, and just crying out and asking for some sort of intervention or some sort of understanding, some sort of rationalization of what is taking place. And it's almost as if that's hardwired in us to reach up, to want to reach to something in the highest, that is to say, perhaps God. At least to me, it would be God, and that's the way that I see it. But it is like reaching to the highest. It's something beyond, and must be able to have some sort of explanation or some sort of solution to what is taking place. So I don't think it's merely a religious sort of notion or a religious sort of act, but it it is something that's hardwired into us, and it's this acknowledgement of a higher order of being, if you will. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, and particularly the act of prayer itself as a form of prioritization and humility. And so when we are praying, right, it's like me in the lowest position reaching up to something higher. And when we have this prayer, we bring up these particular items into this realm, to this conversation of prayer, right? um, and we're bringing up the most important things to the forefront of our consciousness, right? So in a sense, we are, as we are praying, we are creating up a list of prioritization, the things that are the most important. These are the things to think about. In fact, you see that in the Lord's Prayer, right? Because in the Lord's Prayer, it's it's a distillation of existential necessities: forgiveness, sustenance, and moral guidance. And you see this kind of, you see what he prays for, and you see that what he prays for are the things in the highest, and the things that we should prioritize in the highest, right? And so he starts with first acknowledging the one that is in the highest, which is God, hallowed be thy name, your kingdom come, bringing that which is above down, your will be done. Grant us today our daily bread. These are things coming down. Lead us not into temptation. And so it's like, it's a acknowledgement. These are the things that must be prioritized, right? And so through prayer, we're essentially aiming our being towards the higher ideals. And we're embracing humility as we do, because there's a realization that we do not have all the answers to all of these problems, but also that we do not have it within ourselves to constantly and consciously be arranging our priorities in such a way. And I think also the fact of bowing our heads. It's like we're bowing ourselves to that in the highest to grant us the things that we need in order for us to carry our lives in the correct way. And so, the act of prayer brings upon this practice of humility. And so I think that's one of the key things, one of the important things about why we should pray, is because it teaches us humility, right? And so there is a lot to be said about that, in fact. But there's also something, else that you kind of see throughout Scripture, which is this idea of praying for others, right? And praying for oneself, right? It's not that you're just asking for something. You're transforming your perception of others from adversaries to almost fellow travelers in the landscape of life, especially when you pray for others, because when you pray for those who you consider to be your enemy, that means that you are taking your lowest possible thoughts towards those individuals and actually reframing how you think about them, and bringing the thoughts about them in the highest possible sense, if you're doing it in the right way, and not just saying, as we see through some examples, that people can pray for other people in a demeaning way, in a condescending way. But if done in the proper sense, you can pray for others in which you bring them into the highest possible. You think about them in the highest possible way, and psychologically, cognitively, this is great positioning to think about individuals in the highest possible sense, and ask that the things from above come down on this individual, and to receive that blessing. It is something that helps us to develop this level of grace that we seek for ourselves, but for others, right? Um, it is an act of psychological growth and understanding, to be able to view individuals not from this low position, but from this high position. It does provide a certain level of psychological growth. And it also helps to, in reframing the way we think about these individuals, it also makes it easier for us to let go whatever possible hurt that they have done to us, or whatever possible thing that we disdain from them, that thing that we do not like about them. It allows us to have some sort of level of grace and believe that something greater will take care of that, and we move that out of our hands from the desire that we typically have to provide justice ourselves, which is kind of complicated in the sense that it's hard for us, being unjust ourselves, to be able to provide that ultimate level of justice, especially if we find that we can be hypocritical too in some of the things that we do. So, number one, prayer being that orientation to the highest. There's a reason why we bow our heads, right? It's like this acknowledgement that I am below and there is something greater above, right? It's an act of humility. And so, on top of viewing prayer as a dialogue and this, moment of silence in which you can reorganize your thoughts, in this moment that you can orient yourself to the things that are highest, you also are opening up yourself to possibilities that you normally would be close to. And so, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say you are praying for an individual to be able to, let's say, have a better outlook on life. Let's say we're praying for this individual who is in the pit, in the midst of suffering, and we are praying for them to have some sort of relief, some sort of divine understanding of that which they're going through. Well, if you pray that kind of prayer constantly, you're also opening up yourself to the participation in that act, because as you orient yourself to that, you also will more likely open your eyes to possibilities around you that can help facilitate that, and you can see that as divine intervention, in the sense that even the opening of your eyes to the opportunities that were there, that which is above was trying to show you, in and of itself is an answer to prayer, and that miracle too, right? And so, we talked about how it fosters humility, it clarifies our values, it expands our capacity for empathy, and it orients ourselves into the right direction, right? And it's a great way to start your day because, well, I mean, imagine if the first thing that you do when you wake up is to watch a Netflix series, or to watch, or to go on social media and see the worst possible things happening, and the worst possible ideas and opinions. To start your day with that level of orientation, you're already entering into the world of chaos. And so, entering into the world, or entering into that day in life through prayer, through providing order and structure into your life, you are more able to go about your day with the right set of priorities, and not be infuriated about those things which you cannot change or do anything about. And so it's a great way to start your day and to orient yourselves and to find yourselves in a place where you can also express a certain level of gratitude. And we know that individuals who express more gratitude on a daily basis are more likely to live longer, happier lives, because gratitude is almost a key um, to longevity, if you will. And so prayer allows for this space in which gratitude can be expressed towards people, towards things, right? The things that we have, and gratitude towards God for the things that we have. And with that sort of level of orientation, well, you can carry yourself throughout the day in a much more meaningful way, in a much more peaceful way, right? And it's interesting when you think about the definition of prayer, and I think I was looking at it was Webster's definition of prayer was talked about a dialogue, but a way of expressing gratitude towards God or objects of worship, which is interesting. And so that kind of brings upon the idea that, like, you can you can pray towards things that are not in the highest position, which is to say that you can you can pray to things that, and ask of these things the same perhaps request that you could put towards the highest, but you're putting your request towards the things that are in the lowest, the things that should not be regarded, the things that should not be put into this hierarchy of prioritization. You're seeking these principal things that we've discussed from these objects that cannot provide that, because these objects live in the realm of well, in the human world, and don't have this transcendent ability to, how would you say, help reorganize and and align your life in the way that it should be. And so you could say, well, sometimes people pray to drugs, sometimes people pray to other people. And how do you do that? Well, by orienting your highest thoughts towards those things. But those things are not the ones that you should be doing that to, and that can cause a high level of problems in one's lives. So, um, it's interesting to think about prayer from that perspective, irrespective of beliefs. Um, prayer is a very useful tool, and a great way to orient yourself. And I would say that if you can look at it from a Christian perspective, or at least look at it from the perspective that there is a God up above, that makes the prayer experience even more enriching and much more profound. And so I just wanted to share that prayer, and hopefully that is useful.